Hello 9th class students. The next chapter which I am going to start for you is atoms and molecules. See, when it comes to SSC examination, this chapter is very important, because in the next year you have a chapter by name structure of an atom, which is again a high weightage chapter, and when it comes to intermediate, again this chapter repeats. Okay, so the foundation which you will be receiving in the 9th class is going to help you understand the chapters in the later stages or the advancement of the topics in atoms and molecules. Okay, so I'm going to start atoms and molecules. It's a bit lengthy chapter and I'll be going in very detail for this one, so watch the videos which I'm giving you now.
Hello friends, this video on atoms part 12 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Please make sure that you have watched all the videos till part 11 before going ahead with part 12. So now let us talk about some of the limitations in detail. So let us talk about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, because we saw that Bohr's theory contradicted Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So let us see what was Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. However, I have discussed it in one of our previous lessons when we were talking about dual nature, right? So anyways, let's have a quick review. In somewhere around 1927, Heisenberg stated that it is impossible to determine simultaneously the exact position and exact momentum of an electron. So the name itself suggests uncertainty. That means if you have an object which is moving with some velocity v, so if you say that you know that you are able to measure the velocity accurately, so if you measure the velocity accurately, that means the position, because you know the exact velocity with which the object is moving. So that means you will not be able to tell the exact position where the object is at every instant of time. And the vice versa is also true. If you say that I know the exact position of the object at a given instant of time, that means you cannot evaluate the exact velocity of that object. So position and momentum are two things which cannot be determined at the same time with complete accuracy. So it was mathematically expressed as delta x multiplied by delta p is always greater than equal to h by 2 pi, where delta x is the uncertainty in position and delta p is the uncertainty in momentum. Now, if you want to learn Heisenberg's uncertainty principle in little more detail, you can refer to the lesson on dual nature of radiation and matter. Now, it rules out the existence of definite paths or trajectories of electrons and other similar particles. Therefore, in this case, as it mentions that it doesn't talk about exact position or exact momentum. So that means it will not talk about definite paths of electrons, because Bohr's model was talking about a definite or a fixed circular path which the electron was following. But if Heisenberg uncertainty principle is true, then electron cannot have a definite circular path, right? Because we will not be able to define its position and momentum accurately, right? It therefore means that the precise statements of the position and momentum of electrons have to be replaced by the statements of probability. So we can never say that the electrons will move in this circular path and the electron's position at this point is this. So every time we have to use the word probability. That means there is a probability that the electron might be at this position. Whenever you say that there is an uncertainty, that means there is a probability. If you say, for example, I'll give you a statement. Let us suppose if I ask you, will you be coming to school tomorrow? There is one possibility that you will say yes. That means it is precise. You know the exact answer to the question. So if you say yes, that means there is no possibility that you will not come. It is sure that you will come. You say that no, I will not come. So that is also precise statement. Now, if you say there is a probability that I might come, that means there is a possibility that you can come, there is a possibility that you cannot come. So this probability comes into picture when you are not sure of something. So Heisenberg told that we can never be sure of the exact position or the exact momentum at the same time. So therefore, whenever we talk about the position of the electrons, the motion of the electrons around the nucleus, so whatever we are talking about, whenever we are talking about the atomic structure, we are basically talking about we are also talking about the distribution of the electrons around the nucleus, the movement of the electrons around the nucleus. So we can never use precise statements that electrons will move in this orbits, electrons will have fixed radius, electrons will have this and that. We can never use those statements. We will always have to use that there is a probability. That is, the probability that the electron will be at this position is this. Probability that the electron will move with this much velocity is this. So every time there is the word probability and there is no accuracy. The effect of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is significant only for motion of microscopic objects and is negligible for that of macroscopic objects. Right, here we are talking about microscopic objects, right? We have spoken about all these things in the lesson on dual nature, that why this de Broglie's theory or Heisenberg's theory, they apply for microscopic objects and not for macroscopic objects, right? So because it talks about those objects which have got greater mass, which have got lesser mass but with extremely high velocities and all, right? So right now we are talking about atomic structure, so we are dealing with the microscopic objects. So in this case, the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle plays a significant role. So this is how Heisenberg's uncertainty principle was contradicted by Bohr's theorem. The next one was de Broglie's hypothesis, which talked about the wave-particle duality of matter. De Broglie in 1924 proposed that matter, like radiation, should also exhibit dual behavior. So de Broglie told that any object which we see can behave like a wave, can also behave like a particle. So every object on this earth has wave nature as well as particle nature. So this was de Broglie's hypothesis. He told that the wavelength associated with any object of mass m moving with a velocity v is given by lambda is equal to h by mv. So he told that just as the photon has momentum as well as wavelength, the electrons should also have momentum as well as wavelength. So for de Broglie, every object, no matter what, for every object, whether it is microscopic or macroscopic, every object can behave as a wave. But now I'll mention what happens in case of macroscopic object. The mass is very large. Therefore, the wavelength associated with it becomes very small. Therefore, when the wavelength becomes very small, the wave nature is not much visible, right? Therefore, in the macroscopic world, you do not see particles behaving like waves because the wavelength associated with them is extremely small. That's what is written here. The wavelengths associated with ordinary objects are so short because of their large masses that their wave properties cannot be detected. The wavelengths associated with electrons and other subatomic particles can, however, be detected experimentally because their masses are extremely small. For an electron, the mass is 9.1 into 10 to the power minus 31 kgs, which is an extremely small mass. Therefore, the wavelength associated with the electron is not that small. It can be detected experimentally. But if you look at the Bohr's theory of atomic structure, he never spoke about the wavelength associated with an electron. He spoke about the wavelength which he spoke about in the Rydberg's formula, that is the wavelength of the radiation which was emitted when electron jumps from a higher energy level to a lower energy level. But he never spoke about the wavelength of an electron. He never spoke about that. He always considered electrons as particles which are moving with a fixed velocity in a fixed orbital radius in circular orbits around the nucleus. Right? So that is how Bohr's theory also contradicted the wave-particle duality of matter. Now we will look at de Broglie's explanation of Bohr's postulate. So here, however, we saw that Bohr did not take into consideration the wave-particle duality concept of de Broglie's proposal. However, de Broglie was able to explain the postulate which was given by Bohr. Which postulate are we talking about? The postulate which told that the angular momentum of an electron is integral multiple of h by 2 pi. This postulate was also explained by de Broglie in his way. So according to de Broglie, an electron which is moving in a circular orbit can be treated as a particle wave. So electron in circular orbit can be treated as a particle wave, right? So this is, let us suppose this is the nucleus and this is the electron. So it says that the electron which is moving in this circular orbit can be considered as a particle wave. I mean, it is not drawn properly, so it can be considered as a particle wave of this sort. So now just remember the example of the string. Let us suppose if you have a string. If you pluck the string from here, what happens? Several number of waves are formed. Many wavelengths are formed. Now out of these, many wavelengths die out because some are formed on the left, some on the right, so that interference take place and they die out. So only those wavelengths survive where the net wavelength is an integral multiple of n lambda. Right? That is what was the concept of nodes when we talked about waves, right? So for an electron in an orbit of radius r, this is the radius r. So what is the distance that is travelled by the electron? It is 2 pi r, that is the circumference of the circle. So if this distance travelled by the electron is integral multiple of lambda, only then the wavelengths will survive. So and only those wavelengths survive where the wavelength is an integral multiple of lambda. So from this we can say 2 pi r is equal to n. What is lambda? According to de Broglie hypothesis, lambda is equal to h by mv. So from this we can say mvr is equal to nh by 2 pi. And this was the postulate which was given by Bohr. Right? So we can see that the same postulate which was given by Bohr considering electron as a particle, we arrive at the same postulate considering electron as a wave. So in this case, we have considered electron's circular motion as a particle wave, and we have also applied this logic considering the wave nature, right? Because in case of wave, it so happens that only those wavelengths survive at the nodes for which the net wavelength is an integral multiple of lambda, right? So for more detail on this specific topic, you can refer to the lesson on waves.
Thank you. Please visit examfear.com to watch free educational videos, try free online tests, get the best quality study materials, study from the best tutors and mentors, and much more. Thank you once again.
Hello friends, this video on atoms part 13 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Please make sure that you have watched all the videos till part 12 before going ahead with part 13. Now let us talk of spectra of multi-electron atoms. This was again another very major drawback of Bohr's theory, that it could explain only the spectrum of hydrogen, which was a one electron atom, but it could not explain the spectra of multi-electron atoms. Unlike orbitals of hydrogen or hydrogen-like species, what are hydrogen-like species? For example, helium plus or lithium plus plus. These are hydrogen-like species because however helium had 2 electrons, but it gave up 1 electron and became 1 electron atom. So this helium plus since it has 1 electron, so it is known as hydrogen-like species. Similarly, lithium 2 plus, it gave out both 2 of its electrons, so now it has 1 electron. So it is known as hydrogen-like species, whose energies depend only on the quantum number n. The energies of the orbitals in multi-electron atoms depend on quantum numbers n and l. So that is why things become complex, because Bohr had taken into consideration only the principal quantum number. He took into consideration the quantization of energy levels, but he has taken only one parameter, and that is the principal quantum number. Now, principal quantum number alone is not sufficient to describe the atomic spectra of multi-electron atoms. So, therefore came up the new era of quantum mechanics. So, what did quantum mechanics do? The classical mechanics, based on Newton's laws of motion, successfully describes the motion of macroscopic objects such as a falling stone, orbiting planets, which have essentially particle-like behavior. So as long as we are with classical mechanics, we can think of things which we see around us. Everything is macroscopic. Every motion can be described by Newton's laws, and every particle is particle. There is no concept of duality. However, it fails when applied to microscopic objects. So, this Newton's laws and all, they fail when we try to apply them on microscopic objects like electrons and protons. This is mainly because of the fact that classical mechanics ignores the concept of dual behavior of matter, especially for subatomic particles and the uncertainty principle, because as I mentioned, this wave particle duality becomes more prominent when we deal with the microscopic objects, because for macroscopic objects, as I told you, the wavelength associated with them is very small, so it can be neglected. But for microscopic objects, the wavelength is noticeable and we just cannot neglect it. So the classical mechanics did not consider the concept of dual behavior, and therefore it could not succeed in microscopic world. The branch of science that takes into account the dual behavior of matter is called quantum mechanics. When quantum mechanics is applied to macroscopic objects for which wave-like properties are insignificant, the results are the same as those for classical mechanics. So that means quantum mechanics hold true for microscopic as well as macroscopic object. For macroscopic object, quantum mechanics and classical mechanics are the same. For microscopic objects, classical mechanics is a failure, but quantum mechanics is a success. Quantum mechanics was developed independently in 1926 by Heisenberg and Schrödinger. As I mentioned, de Broglie's hypothesis, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and Schrödinger's equation. These three were the milestones for the quantum mechanics. They were the ones who started the concept of dual nature, and this dual nature gave rise to this vast era of quantum mechanics. So if we look at the quantum mechanical model of atom, so how does it look like? In that, we don't say that electrons always move in circular orbits around the nucleus. In that, there are not only orbits but orbitals also which come into picture. You would have studied this in your chemistry lessons about this 2s, 2p, 3s, 3p and the various orbitals. So in this case, if you see this 1, 2, 3, these values represent the principal quantum numbers. That means it talks about which orbit the electron is. Now in one orbit again, the electrons can have different orientations. So depending upon the different orientations, the electrons are arranged in different orbitals. For example, this 2s and 2p, both of them are in the n is equal to 2 orbit, but their orientations are different and therefore they are in two different orbitals, s and p. Similarly, if two electrons are in the same orbit and the same orbital with the same orientation, their spins will be different, right? So in the quantum model, not only one quantum number, but there were 4 quantum numbers which were introduced: n, l, m and s. That is principal quantum number, azimuthal quantum number, magnetic quantum number and spin quantum number. So these 4 quantum numbers together can describe the electrons distribution in an atom, right? So this is the present quantum mechanical model of atom. So with this we will conclude this lesson on atom, and I hope I was able to explain you the atomic structure and what were the various atomic theories which were given by different scientists like Rutherford, Bohr, and finally the quantum mechanical model of atom. So now, based on whatever we have studied so far, we will try to solve few problems.
Thank you. Please visit examfear.com to watch free educational videos, Try free online tests. Get the best quality study materials. Study from the best tutors and mentors, and much more. Thank you once again.
Hello friends, this video on atoms part 14 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Please make sure that you have watched all the videos till part 13 before going ahead with part 14. Let us look at the first problem. It says, what is the shortest wavelength present in the Paschen series of spectral lines? So where was Paschen? Started with Lyman, Balmer, Paschen, Brackett and Pfund, right? So Paschen corresponded to n is equal to 3, right? So let us apply Rydberg's formula, which was 1 by lambda is equal to r into 1 by n1 square minus 1 by n2 square, right? So what was n1? n1 is equal to 3 for Paschen. Now we have to calculate the shortest wavelength. So the wavelength would be shortest, that means the wavelength would be minimum when the transition takes place from the nearest higher energy level. That means n1 is equal to 3. So which is the nearest higher energy level? That is 4. So when the transition takes place from the nearest higher energy level, that time the wavelength, I'm sorry, it's a slip of tongue. The wavelength would be minimum when the transition takes place from the energy level which is farther away, which is farthest from this energy level n1 is equal to 1. If transition takes place from here, then the wavelength is maximum. Now if the transition takes place from infinity, then the wavelength would be minimum. So lambda would be minimum when n2 is equal to infinity. Therefore 1 by lambda minimum is equal to r into 1 by n1 square, because 1 by infinity would be 0. So r divided by 9. Therefore lambda minimum is equal to 9 by r. What is the value of r? R is 1.097 into 10 to the power 7 meter inverse. So if we put this value, we get lambda minimum is equal to 8.2 into 10 to the power minus 7 meters. So this is the shortest wavelength for the Paschen series. Let us look at the next problem. It says a difference of 2.3 electron volt separates two energy levels in an atom. Let us suppose these are the two energy levels. Let us say E1 and E2. So the difference between the energy levels is 2.3 electron volts. What is the frequency of radiation emitted when the atom make a transition from the upper level to lower level? So if the atom make a transition from E2 to E1, radiation will be emitted. So now what would be the emitted radiation's frequency? The change in energy level, that is delta E, is equal to h into nu. So from this we can say nu is equal to delta E divided by h. So here delta E is given as 2.3 electron volts, that is 2.3 into 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 joules divided by h. H is 6.67 into 10 to the power minus 34. So on calculating, we get 5.55 into 10 to the power 14 hertz. So this would be the frequency of the radiation emitted. Let us now look at the third problem. It says the ground state energy of hydrogen atom is minus 13.6 electron volts. What are the kinetic and potential energies of the electron in this state? So when we are talking about ground state, we are talking about the energy level corresponding to n is equal to 1. Now how do I calculate the kinetic energy and potential energy? From the expressions which we have derived in the topic, under the topic electron orbits, we saw that kinetic energy is equal to negative of the total energy and potential energy is equal to twice of total energy. So in this case, what is the total energy in the ground state? Here, total energy is given as minus 13.6 electron volts. Therefore, kinetic energy will be minus of E. that is equal to 13.6 electron volts. This would be the kinetic energy. What would be the potential energy? It will be twice of the total energy, that is 2 into minus 13.6, which is equal to minus 27.2 electron volts. So this would be the potential energy. Let us now have a look at problem 4. It says that a hydrogen atom initially in the ground level absorbs a photon which excites it to the n is equal to 4 level. Determine the wavelength and frequency of the photon. So now here it says that initially it was at ground level. That means initially n1 is equal to 1. Now it absorbs a photon and it gets excited to n is equal to 4 level. That is n2 is equal to 4. So what will be the energy at the ground level? That is minus 13.6 divided by n1 square electron volt. And what would be the energy at this excited level? It will be minus 13.6 divided by n2 square electron volt. So this comes out to be minus 13.6 electron volt, and this comes out to be minus 13.6 divided by 16 electron volt. Therefore, what is the change in energy? The change in energy is, or the difference in energy is E2 minus E1, that is equal to minus 13.6 divided by 16 minus 13.6. Right, so this is the change in energy. Now we have to determine the wavelength and frequency of the photon. Now as I mentioned before also, if this is n is equal to 1 and if this is n is equal to 4, now after absorbing a photon, that means when radiation is absorbed, radiation of frequency nu is absorbed, it gets excited to this energy level. So we can say that delta E is equal to h nu. So delta E is minus 13.6 divided by 16 plus 13.6 is equal to h nu. So from this we can say that this frequency nu can also be written in terms of lambda, that is hc by lambda is equal to 2.04 into 10 to the power minus 18. So this is what you get on calculating this, because this is given in terms of electron volt. So you will also convert it into joules. So you will multiply it by 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulombs. So from this you will get lambda is equal to 97 nanometers. So this would be the wavelength of the photon. So you can very easily calculate the frequency, which is given by c by lambda, that is 3 into 10 to the power 8 divided by 97 into 10 to the power minus 9 meters. So this comes out to be 3.1 into 10 to the power 15 hertz. So this would be the frequency of the photon absorbed. So I have not done this calculation in detail. You can calculate it on your own and you'll find that you get the wavelength as 97 nanometers.
Thank you. Please visit examfear.com to watch free educational videos, try free online tests, get the best quality study materials, study from the best tutors and mentors, and much more. Thank you once again.
Hello friends, this video on atoms part 15 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Please make sure that you have watched all the videos till part 14 before going ahead with part 15. Now let us look at problem 5. It asks, using the Bohr's model, calculate the speed of the electron in a hydrogen atom in n is equal to 1, 2 and 3 levels. Also calculate the orbital period in each of these levels. So now let us see according to Bohr's model. So as per Bohr's model, what is the radius? That is Bohr radius. Bohr radius is given as n square h square epsilon naught divided by pi m e square, right? And what is the velocity of an electron? It is given as E divided by root over 4 pi epsilon naught Rm, right? So now let us try to calculate the speed of the electron for n is equal to 1, 2 and 3, right? So in this case, V is equal to E divided by root over 4 pi epsilon naught m into 1 by root over r, right? So here we can put the value of this r here, right? So this becomes E divided by root over 4 pi epsilon naught m into pi m E into root over pi m divided by n h root over epsilon naught. So this comes out to be E square divided by n 2 epsilon naught h. So this comes out to be the value of V. Therefore, for n is equal to 1, V becomes equal to E square divided by 2 epsilon naught h. Now we know the value of E is equal to, what is E? E is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. What is epsilon naught? It is 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 12. What is h? It is 6.67 into 10 to the power minus 34. So putting these three values, we calculate the value of V. For n is equal to 1, let me represent this V as V1. So this V1 comes out to be 2.18 into 10 to the power 6 meter per second. Similarly, for the next energy level, that is n is equal to 2, V2 becomes equal to E square divided by n into 2 epsilon naught h. So here n will be equal to 2. So this is equal to 2 into 2 epsilon naught h. This is basically the formula which we are using here. So this will be equal to E square divided by 4 epsilon naught h. So putting values in this, we get 1.09 into 10 to the power 6 meter per second. Similarly, for n is equal to 3, V3 becomes equal to E square divided by 6 epsilon naught h. So in this case, again putting the values, we get this value as 7.27 into 10 to the power 5 meter per second. Now once we have calculated the velocities, how can we calculate the orbital period? Orbital period is nothing but the time period to complete one orbit, and one orbit is what? One orbit is one circle, right? That means what is the distance traveled? That is the circumference of the circle, that is 2 pi r divided by the velocity of the electron. So therefore, for n is equal to 1, T1 will be equal to 2 pi r1 divided by V1. So this will be equal to 2 pi by V1 into R1. R1 is N1 square H square epsilon naught divided by pi m E square. So V1 we have already calculated. So putting these values, we get 2 pi into 1 square into 6.62 into 10 to the power minus 34 whole square into 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 12 divided by pi into 2.18 into 10 to the power 6 into 9.1 into 10 to the power minus 31 into 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 whole square. So on calculating this, it comes out to be 1.527 into 10 to the power minus 16 seconds. So this is the value of, this is the orbital period for n is equal to 1. Similarly, for n corresponding to 2, the corresponding orbital period will be equal to 2 pi r2 divided by v2. So this comes out to be 2 pi by v2 into r2, which is n2 square h square epsilon naught divided by pi m e square. So this value again comes out to be, we'll put all the constants here. So the value comes out to be 1.22 into 10 to the power minus 15 seconds. So in similar way, for T3 it will be equal to 2 pi R3 divided by V3. This is equal to 2 pi by V3 into R3, which is N3 square H square epsilon naught divided by pi m E square. So this value comes out to be 4.12 into 10 to the power minus 15 seconds. So these are the orbital periods for n is equal to 1, 2 and 3 energy levels respectively. Let us look at the sixth problem. The problem says radius of the innermost electron orbit of hydrogen atom is 5.3 into 10 to the power minus 11 meters. What are the radii of the n is equal to 2 and n is equal to 3 orbits? So the radius for the innermost orbit is given as 5.3 into 10 to the power minus 11 meters. Now, here R1 is given as 5.3 into 10 to the power minus 11 meters. We have to calculate the value of R2 and R3. Now, from the expression of energy, we have seen that energy is inversely proportional to the radius R. Right? So, energy is inversely proportional to R. And we have also seen that energy is inversely proportional to n square, because energy is given by minus 13.6 by n square electron volt, right? So energy is inversely proportional to the radius, energy is also inversely proportional to n square. So from these two, we can say that radius is directly proportional to n square, correct? So now, using this relationship, we can say that if R1 is given as this much, so for this R1, the corresponding value of n is n1. So for this, the corresponding value of n is n2. For this, the corresponding value of n is n3. And in this problem, n1 is given as 1 because it is the innermost orbit. n2 is 2, second orbit, and n3 is equal to 3. Now using this relationship, we can say that R1 by R2 is equal to n1 square by n2 square. So from this we can say R2 is equal to n2 square by n1 square into R1. What is n2? That is 2. So 2 square divided by 1 square into R1, that is 5.3 into 10 to the power minus 11. So this comes out to be 2.12 into 10 to the power minus 10 meters. Similarly, we can say that R1 by R3 is equal to n1 square by n3 square, or we can say R3 is equal to n3 square by n1 square into R1. So this is equal to 3 square into R1, which is 5.3 into 10 to the power minus 11. So this comes out to be 4.77 into 10 to the power minus 10 meters. So these are the values of the radii of n is equal to 2 and n is equal to 3 orbits respectively. Now let us look at the last problem for this lesson. In accordance with the Bohr's model, find the quantum number that characterizes the Earth's revolution around the Sun in an orbit of radius 1.5 into 10 to the power 11 meters with an orbital speed of 3 into 10 to the power 4 meter per second. Mass of the Earth is given as 6 into 10 to the power 24 kgs. So it says that we have to assume that the Earth's revolution around the Sun is in accordance with the Bohr's model. So what does the Bohr's model say? The Bohr's model says that as per Bohr's model, the electron is the Earth and the nucleus is the Sun. So the electron is revolving around the nucleus in this way. So Bohr's model says that as long as this electron is in one energy level, the angular momentum is an integral multiple of h by pi. That means it says that mvr is equal to nh by 2 pi. This is true as per Bohr's postulate. So from this, which is the quantum number here? This n is the principal quantum number which is involved there. So we can calculate the value of n as 2 pi mvr divided by h. So we can say 2 pi into m is mass of the Earth, that is 6 into 10 to the power 24, into v is 3 into 10 to the power 4, into r is the radius, that is 1.5 into 10 to the power 11, divided by h, which is Planck's constant, that is 6.67 into 10 to the power minus 34. So this value of n comes out to be 2.6 into 10 to the power 74. So this is the quantum number that characterizes the revolution of the Earth around the Sun. So I hope that solving these problems have helped you to understand how we apply the concepts that we have studied in this lesson in solving problems. However, this chapter was more focused on the theory rather than problems. That is, this chapter talked mostly about the structure of an atom. So it is more of understanding rather than just solving problems. So I hope I was able to give you some idea on atoms. So see you all in the next lesson.
Thank you. Please visit examfear.com to watch free educational videos, try free online tests, get the best quality study materials, study from the best tutors and mentors, and much more. Thank you once again.